Okay, so this is about to be a huge info dump, but I think it's going to be really beneficial for you to have all this background information about this particular character before I go in and try to answer any of your questions in regards to the show. I know that the movie universe and the comic book universe aren't exactly the same, they don't really align, but they do take from each other. That's the whole point of them being inspired by the comics, because in the comics certain things happen that are happening both in the movies and in the shows. They might be altered, they might be a bit different, but for the most part they're trying to stay as true to them as they can now. I'm not saying they've always done that, but they are currently trying to do that, which I think is pretty cool. And something that's very important to know, even if they don't end up going into this direction like with the old storylines from the old comics, it's still going to be really helpful for you to have all this background information, because it'll help you understand certain things that are happening and maybe even help you, theorize how it's going to go, how it's going to end up, or even just explain how we got there and why it's so important, okay? So Wanda Maximoff is a pretty old character. She was established in 1962, 64. And she initially came out actually in the as a bad guy in the Team Brotherhood of Mutants. And this is the first comic that she ever appeared in, which was the fourth X-Men comic ever. So she is a mutant, at least established mutant by that point when she's created. Eventually, she does end up going to the good side, joining the Avengers back when the Avengers were like no longer a team. So it was just her, Captain Marvel, her, Captain America, her brother Quicksilver, and of course Okay, so it's just the four of them. They're the only ones in the Avenger team for a little bit. Eventually, Vision does end up joining, and they do end up forming a bond together. They end up joining a relationship and getting married and all that. That's all canon. That's everything that happens within the storylines. And at one point, they do end up having their own like mini series. It's like a 4-issue run. It ran for 4 months from like November all the way until February, I think, of 1980 something. I think 84 or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, so it was a very small run, and it took place right after uh, everyone found out that Magneto was apparently Pietro and Wanda's father. So they had been on his team. They didn't really know that they had a familiar relationship, but at that point it was established now from that moment for a few decades actually that Magneto was their dad. And because of that, every media that has Scarlet Witch in it, Scarlet Witch and Pietro, or either of the two, it heavily implies, it is canonized, it is even just like hinted that Magneto is their father. Whether they push that storyline along or not, it's very much implied that he's their dad, because that's the storyline that everyone knew for like the longest time. And it is important, that information that is important. I'm going to get to that. So another thing that we need to establish here, Wanda's powers, they're very unpredictable. They're actually just so unpredictable that they're both hard to explain in both real life and in the actual canon universe of the heroes themselves. So initially she had what is referred to as hex powers. Her powers were like of probability. She could manipulate probability, and because of that, they basically meant that they were really random. So a lot of times they would use them as kind of a way to kind of push along the plot. Like if they needed something done, if they needed someone stopped, her powers would somehow be able to do that. And it was like really confusing and didn't really explain much for a while, until they eventually started to hone them in and to get her to have more control over them. Eventually she ended up having an ability to control probability and basically make outcomes come out the way she wanted them to. And then a little bit later she ended up getting a control over like chaos magic. She was able to manipulate chaos magic, and she had spirituality in herself. She does learn magic. So, like, she has the ability to learn magic. So initially she didn't. It was just like her name was just Scarlet Witch for no reason, but eventually she does gain that ability and have that power as well. But in 2004, 2005, there is a huge storyline where she ends up manipulating reality. So I will get back to that. I'm going to go into that whole storyline basically, because it is all important and is all relevant to what's happening on the show now. But first, I'm going to go back to the fact that Vision and Wanda were at some point married. They had their miniseries after finding out Magneto was their dad. It lasted very, very little for issues, and that was it. And then it happened again later that year, and that one lasted a little bit longer for about 12 issues, almost an entire year actually. 12, 11. Okay, so it lasted from like I think it was October all the way till September of 1986. So both of these issues did take place in the 80s. In this, Wanda and Vision did have some form of domestic bliss. They were married. They had their own home. They were living in the suburbs. They still went on missions. They were still superheroes, obviously, and they had conflict within their stories where they had to fight villains and everything. But they were trying to have also as normal a life as a human mutant and a sentient robot could have. And at one point, Wanda wanted children, and Vision, as much as he loved her and he adored her and he wanted to give her children, he couldn't. He's not human. He can't have or procreate at all. So Wanda just decided she was going to have kids, and so she manipulated the reality of herself and she decided to have children. She's literally basically thinking, I want kids, and she has kids. She has twins because she herself is a twin, and she very much also loves her brother Pietro. Their names are Billy and Tommy. And for a while, everything's good until it is established that these two children aren't really, her children at all. So she didn't just create them out of nothing. She took their souls, their spirits from something, and they were actually fragments of another soul, a soul belonging to Manifesto, a demon. And eventually he himself takes those souls back. So he takes her children back because the essence that made them who they were is part of him. So when he reforms himself, he's able to absorb their soul, his soul actually, back into himself. And that obviously sets off a tidal wave of things that are just gonna basically go fucking wrong for her for the rest of this entire video. And at some point in the same storyline, Vision ends up fighting someone where he gets so damaged that he has to be rebooted, and when that happens, he no longer has that same human feeling of love and emotion, and just he's more robot than human basically. And because of that, he no longer feels like he should be married to Wanda. In fact, he doesn't feel any connection to or want or desire to be married to Wanda, so that their marriage is in a sense annulled. And so the three most important people in Wanda's life, and excluding her brother obviously, are at this point are no longer part of her life. It's driving her entirely crazy. Her powers, which again are unpredictable, are like on the fritz, and they're literally like at the verge of just spazzing out. And so Agnes Harkness, I believe her name is, she ends up erasing her memory. She takes Wanda's memories of her children and she just completely erases them because she doesn't want her to have to deal with this, especially with when she's on the cusp of just total power meltdown. Okay, she knows that her and Vision are no longer together. I don't remember for sure or not, but I believe that they no longer actually like, she just thinks about that in a different sense. She's not really sure the context, but she does know what happened, so she's like, okay, whatever, this is done. And then we're gonna go ahead and fast forward a few years later, again into 2005, starting off with the Avengers Disassembled storyline. This the storyline and leads into House of M storyline and everything. It did get reconned. It does, alter and change very drastically as the years are to come. But during this time, it was, a big storyline, one that people both loved and hated. So we're gonna go ahead and explain that a little bit. So Avengers Disassembled is basically, as the title explains, it's the last hurrah for the Avengers of that timeline, or time frame, I should say, because it's the same timeline. It's just gonna eventually just split off into other teams. So there's an offshoot comment that one of the Avengers, what's her name? Janet. Okay, that's her name. So she makes an offhand comment that she doesn't want to have children with Hawkeye because she just can't imagine having children with this guy who's very unstable himself. And she very casually talks, makes a comment about Wanda's children herself. But Wanda again doesn't know that she had children, and while Janet tries to back out of that comment and just try to still make it go away, it's in the back of her mind. She's kind of thinking about it. And then at some point within that same time, within like that same moment, an Avenger who everyone thought was dead comes, and Ant-Man goes to him because they're like, "Well, dude, you're dead," and then out of nowhere he just explodes, killing Ant-Man. At least that's what everyone thinks. And everyone's like freaking out because the Adventure Mansion is literally on fire. It's been exploded. All these things are happening at the same time. The UN are literally trying to decide whether or not they're going to give security clearance to the Avengers, because a lot of shit had gone down prior to the storyline happening, and they're still trying to see if they want the Avengers to be a team that's going to be defending them from any threat within the world and without the world, basically. And so there's like a lot of little storylines going on. They're not like massive enough to like have their own real like comics on their own, so they're all like kind of clumped in here, but they are all happening in different issues of different stories. We have Wanda and Captain America kind of having sort of a fling, but not really, kind of like almost maybe having a fling. And then Captain America's like, yeah, I know, we have to like cut this off, and that also doesn't really help her mental state at all. So she ends up actually she's with the main Avengers right now. Tony Stark, who is no one knows is Iron Man, he's trying to present basically why the Avengers should get this clearance, and everyone knows that while people might not know he's Iron Man, they do know that he funds the Avengers themselves, like the mansion they had. He gave that to them. He gives them money to like basically run their operation and everything. So he really desperately needs to be the front that represents them, basically. And at that point, he had been sober for a while. Like, he had a bad drinking problem. He is sober at this point, but while he's presenting, he very much seems like he's drunk. Like, he's slurring his words. He is not making real sense while he's giving this speech, and they deny them their clearance, basically. And so like the Avengers really have no idea what they can possibly do at that point, because like without the clearance, like they can technically still be a team, but they would be doing it without the permission of the United Nations. And they're still not sure how Tony like fucked it up so bad when he definitely wasn't drinking. Like they might not believe him for a bit, but he definitely was completely sober, despite seeming like he wasn't. And then out of nowhere, Vision comes out and starts like throwing up eggs that end up hatching to have like little Ultron droids. They start fighting them. It's like a whole crazy event. Vision dies, and then out of nowhere, a Kree ship just shows up, like a huge armada of like Kree warriors come, and they start fighting and decimating like New York. They're all fighting. Hawkeye dies while this is happening. Like his one of his explosion arrows blows up, and he's gone. And out of nowhere, after months of being gone, Doctor Strange shows up. Doctor Strange, who at that moment thinks Wanda is responsible for everything that's happening. He thinks she's really unhinged and she's going crazy, and that she's the reason that everything's happening. And in a way, he's right. Like, she was the one causing everything to happen. She was the one who caused Ultron to come back. To bring him forth. She was the one who called the Kree there. She might not have known it mentally, but she's the one who decided, or she's the one who manipulated everything to be as it was. So she's the reason those Avengers died, and she's the reason the Avengers themselves are basically like toast at this point. And they eventually are able to get her into a coma, because they really can't stop her. She's like mega powerful. So she's in a coma, and they're trying to figure out what to do with her when Magneto and Professor X come and they take her away. Now remember, Magneto is at this point Wanda's father, and he has that, like, he feels a responsibility for her, and he feels like he has the right to take her somewhere where she'll be in less danger and where she'll be putting people in less danger. So he takes her to the island of Genosha, which was a country basically that only housed mutants for like the longest time. There was millions of mutants there until they were destroyed by Sentinel robots and basically wiped out. So at this point, this island is just like a wasteland, still only for mutants, but still a wasteland. Like, nobody lives there. And he takes her there, and he keeps her in the ruins of a house or a fort mansion or whatever, and him and Professor X are basically just trying to keep her comfortable, trying to get her to like relax and control her powers, basically. And while this is all going down, we're gonna go ahead and switch over to the House of M storyline, because it literally connects right into it. So all these superheroes, some of X-Men, some of the Avengers that are still alive, other heroes like Spider-Man and Captain Marvel, then Miss Marvel, they come and they're having a meeting. Basically, they're trying to decide what are we going to do about Wanda? What are we going to do about her? She's very uncontrollable. She's very unreliable at this point. We don't know if she's literally going to wipe us all out at any moment. She's unstable. She's unhinged. She has the power to basically wipe everything from existence. And like, do we just like leave her as is and hope for the best, or do we just take her out and hope for the best, basically? And that's where the morality comes in, is like, they're heroes and they're here discussing whether or not they're going to kill not only an actual person, but someone that they all consider a friend, someone that they all worked with for years, and someone who they also understand completely is a very dangerous person to be around and just to have in existence right now. When this is all happening, Quicksilver, again, is there. He's still part of the Avengers, so he was there at the time. He runs off, which is his power, to Genosha, trying to explain to Magneto, like, hey, we have to go hide, we have to take her somewhere where they're not going to get her, like, they want to kill her. Magneto literally doesn't know if taking her away is for the best, or if letting them do what they need to do is for the best. Quicksilver, like, totally hates that, but, like, he's trying to just protect his sister, and, that's the end of that little side note there. As they're talking, like, the Avengers and X-Men and everything, they're heading over to Genosha, trying to at the very least have Wanda there so that they can try to talk to her, try to figure out what their next plan of action is going to be. And as they're heading there, everything kind of flashes white. Like, it's crazy. It's like everything goes white and they don't understand what's going on. And at that point, it's like, I was going to try to show it to you, but I don't remember what page it's on, and I don't think I want to look for it, but just know that it's just like it's a huge thing. And they wake up in a world that is altered completely. And this is a storyline that literally took like 5 months to do. It basically took over the entire storyline of every comic that was happening in Marvel within that time period. I think it ran from like the summertime all the way until about November, and it lasted about 5 months. So any issue of a Marvel comic that was happening, like a big continuity issue, became a House of M comic. It might not have been the main storyline, but whether it was X-Men or Fantastic Four or Spider-Man, anything like that, it became a House of M comic. So everything was altered, the entire universe. And in comics, the main timeline for the comics, like there's multiple timelines, obviously. The main timeline is Earth 616. That's the timeline that you want to follow if you want to know what's going down in that reality, or in the main reality, basically. So in that reality, everything was different. They lived in a world where almost 50% of the population were mutants. Like, they accelerated their power, so they were all mutants, and they all, for the majority of the world, were ruled by the House of Magnus, who again was ruled by Magneto and his 3 children, which were Wanda, Pietro, and Polaris, who I can't remember her name right now. It's Laura Lario, I can't remember. Point being that the entire world was shifted, and the heroes who were trying to stop Wanda initially, they didn't even realize it, because their entire worlds were shifted too. They were all living their greatest heart's desire, basically a kind of a safe way to like keep them from wanting to investigate further into what was happening. Due to that, everyone just kind of went with it for a while. Like, no one really tried to question it until Wolverine woke up and realized, oh yeah, this is all fucked up. See, Wolverine's power is to heal, so his mind had already healed the part that was manipulated by reality, by Wanda's powers, and he realized, nah, this isn't the way the world is supposed to be. So he's off running away, trying to figure out what's going on. He finds a mutant girl who has the power to basically revert people's mental state back to the original reality. So he takes her, and he goes to find the people that would best help him, like whether they be mutants or Avengers, anything. He goes to find them and change their memories back, basically revert their memories to what they need to be. And they all decide, like, oh yeah, this is definitely Magneto's doing. He used Wanda and he created this entire universe, so we got to stop him. And so they go and they they infiltrate basically House of Magnus. They infiltrate this entire palace, and they're trying to stop Magneto. And it's not until Magneto is confronted with the little girl and he gets his memories back, that they realize, oh shit, Magneto wasn't the one to do this at all. Turns out it was Quicksilver who, in a desperate plea or a desperate act to try to save his sister, convinced her to create a world where they would be safe, a world where they would be happy. And in this world, again, mutants were the dominating population. They were oppressing humans, not gonna lie. Magneto was like the leader, he was in charge. And Wanda in this universe had her sons back. She had her sons back, and she had no power. She was Magneto's human daughter, his sapient daughter. She was mostly in the background. She didn't really interact with anybody. She just wanted to spend time with her kids. And I mean, in reality, that's the only thing she wanted, was to, return to the state of being where what she had lost was back. And some of the Avengers that had been killed within the Avengers Disassembled storyline, she brought them back to life as well. Like, they were like Hawkeye, an important character, who was also at some point in this previous publication in love with Wanda, and she loved him too in some ways. He brings her back. She brings him back, and he's actually the one who takes her off to the fact that this is not a real reality. Like, he's pissed off. Obviously, I mean, he was murdered by her, so obviously he's gonna be totally pissed. And he shoots her, and he tries to basically he's fighting, yelling at her what she's doing, what's going on, what's happening. And she finally is confronted with the fact that, holy shit, she did all of this. And it's bonkers, I'm not gonna lie. And then while this is happening, stop, Cora, hold on. Alright, sorry, my dog was barking, but you know what, I just saw her name was Lorna, by the way. That was gonna bug me for a bit. So here we have Hawkeye is over here fighting with her, basically trying to get her to admit to the fact that she altered reality, which she did. That's one of her sons, and here she is again losing her mind and basically wiping him from existence again. So this is all happening, and Magneto is fighting with Quicksilver, which honestly is the last straw for her, because Magneto literally murders Quicksilver. He drops an entire building on his head. And at that point, again, Wanda is not a very stable character right now. She is not in her right mind. She is under so much pressure, frustration, grief, and she has super amped up power. She is OP as fuck, let me tell you. At this point in the storyline, this entire Avengers Disassembled all the way into House of M and a little bit further, her powers are reality warping powers. Initially she just had the probability thing, she had her chaos magic control, and she does go back to that eventually, but right now her powers are so amplified that she can alter the fabric of reality to the point where she changed the entire world. She changed the biological structure of millions of people. And so she's OP as fuck. And people are trying to fight while she's unstable and unhinged, and it's not going to end it well for them, because at that point she brings Quicksilver back, and she's trying to figure out she's trying to understand exactly what's happening. She's trying to figure out where everything went wrong. And she realizes that despite the fact that she created an entire world where everyone should be happy, they still wouldn't let her be. Still wouldn't let her have her children. Still wanted to change everything. And yeah, okay, it's for the best. She needed everyone and wanted everything to go back to normal in the way it was. But she still saw mutants and the power that mutants had basically as the reason why everything was wrong in the world. And she uttered 3 words that literally changed changed comics for years to come, and it was no more mutants. And in that moment, the moment she uttered those 3 words, everything reverted back to normal. The world went back to the way it was. People got their memories back. People from living those Avengers who had reverted their memories at the time remembered what they knew then too. So they had the memories of the original timeline as well as the memories from House of M on top of it. So they just were a mess for a long time. And yeah, so everything went back to normal. The world was put back to the way it was, with the exception that where there was once millions of mutants, there were now only a little under 200, at 198, I believe. And yeah, so the reason I want you to know this is kind of important, is that it looks like that might be something that could possibly happen within the show itself. I'm going to get into it a little bit more right now, but I just wanted you to have this background information. Like, Wanda, OP as fuck, her power is unpredictable, unstable, and honestly a little bit unreliable at most times. And also the ability to just like fucking fuck with everyone. And she doesn't just mess with you mentally, dude. She literally and completely changes everything that could happen. Like, any little thing. Like, she can make this pen, or sorry, not this pen, these tweezers, she can literally turn them into something completely different. Like, she is OP as fuck, and they can come alive, who knows. But yeah, so everything is back to normal. Those normal mutants. There a lot does play in again to a bigger storyline that it also involves her kids and everything, but they're not as important at this moment in time. So we're gonna go ahead and just keep that as it was, and then go into WandaVision a little bit. So that's her comic book wise, right? This is Wanda Maximoff as she is from the comics, from the stories that we've told from, like, again, the 60s all the way into present time. And I'm only giving you up until 2005 because, again, it's a lot of information, it's a big info dump, and I just need you to have this idea of her in your head where she can alter reality and manipulate things enough that people are terrified of her, like, and with good reason, okay? The next thing I want you to explain here now is, in the movies, she's not a mutant. Like, it is canonically established that she was human. Her and her brother were experimented on by Hydra agents, and they were given their powers through the Mind Stone. The Mind Stone was in the scepter that Loki used to control people in the first Avenger movie, obviously. And that scepter, the Mind Stone, is also what gives Vision that little the Yellowstone that he has. That's what gives him the basically ability to be alive, to be who he is as Vision, okay? And a lot of people speculate that that's the reason that they have the connection, is because her powers were given to her from the Mind Stone. He is alive because of the Mind Stone. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Who knows? But that's where her powers come from. And again, it was established in Age of Ultron that her powers were telekinetic and mind manipulation. So she can definitely alter someone's mind, and she can move things around with her mind. All mind-based powers. But as we've been seeing, especially within this show of WandaVision, her powers seem to go further beyond just mind manipulation. She has red powers, which is like, they very much are reminiscent of the Reality Stone, like the ether from Thor Dark World, and even from in the Infinity War. You see Thor, when he uses the red stone, he alters reality a lot. Like, he changes what people see, what people feel and hear and everything. Her powers seem to reflect that a lot. And it could be that because it is an Infinity Stone, they just all kind of have a similar connection to each other. Maybe her powers were given to her by the Mind Stone, but it also somehow took some of the aspects of the other stones themselves, just because of the connection and because of how she was basically experimented on. She also seems to have some time manipulation powers. It could just be that, the reality manipulation is just altering time, but canonically she can manipulate time as well. So who knows? Does she have 3 of the stones that are like embodied in her? Not really. But does she have 3 of the stones' powers within her? Very possible. From that point, we know that for a while she was very OP in just the fact that she could control and levitate and like she can physically like crush people. She can physically crush creatures. She has physical powers, and she definitely has the mind manipulation as seen again in Age of Ultron. What we're seeing here in WandaVision, however, goes far beyond that. It is definitely something that she's coming up with. Per 3rd episode, she's definitely the one who is changing things in the show. When something doesn't go the way she wants, or doesn't make her comfortable, she's definitely changing it so that it fits her narrative. Something that I want to also bring into sorry, this is kind of dusty. Something I also want to bring into focus is that this show is supposed to kind of lead into the second Doctor Strange movie, which is called Doctor Strange and the madness of the multiverse. I have this running theory that she's going to be the reason that mutants kind of enter into the MCU universe, and I'm really hoping they do that way, but who knows. But the point still stands. Doctor Strange is going to play a role within Wanda's narrative, whether it be in the show or whether it be in his movie. He's definitely going to have a role in her narrative, and considering the fact that he has magic and she eventually does learn magic, it stands to reason why they would be connected in that way. Another thing that I really want you to like try to think about when you're watching the show. Look at the way that they're filming the show. They're using multiple cameras, or at least the idea of multiple cameras, the way sitcoms, especially in the early 50s, 60s, and 70s, would use. Like, that's very common. Actually, I think sitcoms even nowadays use multiple cameras just because of the shots, because they're all done in like one. They're not done in widescreen or anything. They don't really move around the way most movies or other shows do. They're doing that. But at certain times, especially like when she's finding the helicopter for the first time, or when she's trying to figure out, like, you know, is Monica really Monica? Is she my friend or not? Like, you can tell that there are wider shot angles. Those angles are usually done during horror movies. Like, you know, they're supposed to intensify the scene. They're supposed to like kind of scare you. They're supposed to make you. They're supposed to basically up your adrenaline. Okay, they're supposed to seem that way intentionally, because, you know, you're supposed to feel what the character is feeling. And, you know, Doctor Strange is supposed to be a horror movie. This show is no doubt supposed to be a horror movie as well. It might not get as graphic, maybe, but it's definitely going to, you know, fuck up some people's minds a little bit. And, let me see. Was there anything else that we needed to go over here? I mean, I know that those are like really big aspects, and having, like I said, having that background information that she can manipulate time, that is also something that I feel like is going to really help you understand that she is literally the one controlling everything. Oh, okay. So while she might be the one controlling everything, it might also not be her fault. Everything that I told you earlier about Avengers Disassembled and House of M and everything, House of M, again, it was she's the one who did it, but she did it because her brother asked her to. Her brother kind of like, you know, told her, hey, do this, do this, do this, and she went with it, and she created this universe. So yeah, she's the one who did it. She is the force behind it all, but she wasn't the idea behind it. Similarly, that happens in Avengers Disassembled. She was the one who did it all. She brought the Krees over. She brought Ultron over. She caused everyone to do everything, and she murdered everyone. Like, no doubt. She even like kind of goes crazy in the beginning of House of M, just trying, like, when they keep trying to force her to remember that she's the one who did it. Like, she's unstable as fuck. But she's also not the one who came up with the idea. She didn't do it voluntarily. She didn't even do it unintentionally. She did it because she was being mind controlled by Doctor Doom. Again, another storyline that we aren't going to go into right now because it's really long and it involves other things that I really don't want to talk about right now. But yeah, so yes, right now in the show, canonically, she was the one doing this. It was kind of implied throughout the entire time that, you know, in the scene where they're at dinner and Mr. Hart starts choking, they're just staring at him. The wife is just laughing, and Vision doesn't do shit until Wanda literally looks at him in the eye and tells him, Vision, save him. Like, she's ordering him to do that. He does it. Time goes back to normal, and they're back into their subcon reality. Her mental state right now is not good. Her seeing Vision the way she did at the end of that episode, seeing him as he was after Thanos murdered him, yeah, bro, like, she is crazy as fuck right now. I don't want to use that word, but she is definitely in her way in her grieving state. Like, she came back from the blip, and she is not over what happened. She is trying desperately to hang on to what she wants in her reality to be, and her reality currently is having a happy, normal as can be, life with her husband and raising her children at this point. So yeah, they might not go into the storyline where her children are part of a demon named Manifesto. They might not even go to the storyline where the children get erased at all. They might. Who knows? They do eventually come back, but they come back as teenagers, and she doesn't raise them. So, I mean, you know, there's a lot to go down. We also know for a fact that the characters who played Quicksilver both in Age of Ultron and in the X-Men movies, they're both going to be in this show. They were both casted in the show. Whether or not they're casted as the characters of Pietro, who knows? I think it'd be pretty cool if they used the X-Men Pietro, and they like kind of showed that he's from an alternate reality, even though he might not remember that he's from that alternate reality. Like, that'd be pretty dope. That'd be a really interesting way to bring forth the X-Men. But then that also means that they would have to kind of keep that cast of the X-Men. And honestly, I kind of want them to reboot the whole thing, because those movies were trash. And I think they can do better. I think they should try to do better at the very least. And then they also, have the ability to bring her brother back. For the longest time, Kevin Feige, the guy who basically runs all of the Marvel movies, he was very much adamant that they weren't going to bring him back. They weren't going to bring anyone back from the dead. But I mean, they did that with Phil Coulson, and while they have life model decoys in shields, I don't think they're going to use those. And in comics, people don't always stay dead. Like, they might die, and they might die and stay dead for a while, and maybe even permanently, but somehow or some way, some of them sometimes come back. Case in point, Hawkeye, who does return multiple times, and even though he is very unhinged, he seems to be having his life kind of together right now. But yeah, so that's what I know right now. That's what I have for you. Any questions, just let me know. But sorry again, this was like a super long video. I didn't mean for it to be that long, but I hope this kind of clears things up a little bit for you. Or if it makes you more confused, sorry about that.